Hello humanity, it is I, Evans Colton, and this is D&D for the Family. Welcome to the first video in our series, Reflections on the Ethereal Sea, where I share some of my personal experience, insight, goals, and dreams. I've always wanted to play D&D, ever since I was a kid. I didn't know anyone as a child, teen, or young adult who played. My interest was renewed when I watched Stranger Things on Netflix, but I realized that I would need to start my own game if I really wanted to play. I got the D&D 5e starter set, picked up a player's handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual, and began a small game that I ran with my wife and daughter. It was fun. It was fun to practice and learn how to play. I enjoyed watching my family have fun. However, those first early games went quiet as I took on a bigger challenge of running a full campaign for some of my peers. I reached out to a bunch of people I worked with and got a group of about 14 really cool people to play with me. I ran a game every week, but different people would come on different weeks, so I had to figure out how to run for a large group and how to plan games for party with a different number of players and different PCs every week while maintaining storyline continuity. I learned how to scale encounters up or down to pose an appropriate difficulty based on those variables, and I learned after about 20 games or so that I needed to consider time frame into encounter design too, not just how hard I wanted the fight to be for the players. That campaign ran for over 50 games and reached a pretty satisfying conclusion. I'll always treasure the friendships we built, and I still remain in contact with the party even after my family moved away. After we moved, I looked for another game to join, but was again unsuccessful. My wife, daughter, and I had always kept our game quietly idle in the background, so we started playing again. I brought my game kit with me on a trip to visit our family out of state, and soon found myself running a game for not only my wife and my daughter, but also my sister, my mother, and my godmother. After that fateful day at the game table, during which my wife's PC, Althea, met the wolf who would eventually become her familiar Piggy Nips, I decided to push to make a new campaign that would involve those new players. As of now, both of my sister's boys play in the game as well, and we have players from ages 6 to 70 plus all playing at the same table. This was the inspiration for me to start D&D for the Family. I realized that this game is uniquely suited to bring people from different locations together and to bring people of different ages together in a way that's challenging and fun. Now, in order for people to play, there has to be someone willing to run the game as the Dungeon Master or Game Master. Hashtag DnDFtF isn't really geared towards players versus GMs. It's meant to teach those in front of and behind the DM screen. I want to take what we do and how we play and share it with everyone so that we can all learn together. I am not an expert DM, but I find that teaching others can be a great way to learn more about a subject. One of the reasons I love to GM is that it's like a path that always opens up with more to think about, more to do, more to create. It takes time and effort to be a master GM, or just to be a good player for that matter, but everyone has to start somewhere. And a party needs a GM before they can do almost anything else. Even if a party takes turns running the game, someone at least needs to act as that arbiter or judge or referee for making sure that the game follows rules. Those rules should be agreed upon by everyone at the table, GM and players. In all my games, I stick pretty closely to what is written in the D&D 5e Player's Handbook because, 1, someone already did the work for me, 2, the more I deviated in my experience, the more unstable and unbalanced the games became, and 3, I like the consistency of information for the group, and the accessibility I get with D&D Beyond, so everyone's always operating under the same set of assumptions about how to interact with the game world. Anyway, I felt that it was up to me to learn how to play and to start my own game, if I really wanted to play. And I was able to make that happen. I hope that D&D for the Family can help other new players get the inspiration to start their own games too. It takes time and effort to be a GM, but it's also a ton of fun. I feel like the time required can vary a lot based on the personal situation and familiarity of each GM, sometimes game to game. Newer players need to read the rules, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster's Manual, to understand what they need to do. I also spend time reading articles, blogs, and watching videos on YouTube to find answers to questions and learn more about the craft. More experienced players won't need the same amount of study time, but even then, one must still prep for a campaign. Modules can help with this because the story is already there for you, but you still have the study time that you have to take to learn the module. Sometimes it's faster to play in your own games because you have the freedom to do whatever you want, but keep in mind you also need to then design the encounters to try to make them feel fun and balanced. I personally go for as minimal an approach as possible, because I don't have a lot of time to spare. My family DnDFtF campaign is running mostly off of modules, and for me, right now, it's nice to not feel pressure to plan something fresh every game. However, I still go through before every game, make plans, tweaks, and adjustments for what I think they might have to deal with. Over time, you can draw on your experience from running games to save time planning encounters because you'll have a better understanding of what works and what doesn't work. Experience really is the best teacher, and the best way to get that XP is to start running a game. Before I even started playing games with my wife and daughter, I ran game combat encounters on my own, with just minis and a map. I practiced running PCs and monsters from the Monsters Manual. I got used to reading creature stat blocks, spell effects, which dice were which, running initiative and tracking it, and gained some very basic insight into trying to use a combat map. Turns out, maps don't need to be super fancy, they can just be some basic lines and shapes to indicate what's there, and that's it. I use a gridded ChessX battle map. It's Wet Erase, it cost about 25 bucks. I picked it up at a game store and it's lasted me all these games just fine. When I felt capable enough to run games on my own and have fun with the process, then I couldn't wait to try running it for my family. It won't take long for anyone to get there so long as you're interested in learning how to play. You just have to be willing to put in the time. You also have to be willing to be vulnerable. But this is also true for the players. If you're able to be silly and emotionally free enough to play a character, to roleplay, it requires you to be a little brave. I felt a lot of pressure as a new GM to make the game perfect and amazing and exciting every time. I still do. But I also realized that I wanted to have fun playing, and I haven't let that part of the game get out of balance for me. Some of my games were great, some were just so-so, most were pretty good, and some were epic. I judge my success as a DM by how much fun my players have, and how eager they are to come back to my table. If they have fun, I have fun. But in all my countless hours spent running D&D for friends and family, I've only had one turn in the passenger seat as a player. A member of my first campaign who played a dwarf paladin named Zabik Tierson had an idea for a game that he wanted to try, and I was so happy to let him steer the ship for a night. I had a blast playing the GM PC. Yes, there was a GM-run player character, but that's a topic for another video. As a PC, just regular PC for a change. Zabik did a great job, and the encounter was wild and something I never could have expected. It even left me with a plot hook to use in the future, which was appreciated. And I enjoyed the experience, and it gave me a perspective on running the game that I didn't have before. Now this puts me in the unenviable position of being what is known in D&D circles as a forever GM, which is someone who always runs the game but who never gets to play. The good news is, I really love being a GM, and even when I have a chance to play in someone else's game, I don't think I'll ever really stop wanting to run my own. That's what's so cool about this game that we play. Like the path that I described before, it just keeps opening up into new knowledge about ourselves, new memories of good times with friends and family, and new creative inspirations waiting just around the corner. I still hope to be a player in someone else's game someday. I'm excited to think about the type of community that we can build with DnDFtF and the opportunities that it might bring. Thank you all so much for spending time with D&D for the family. Until next time, take care of yourselves and try to have some fun.